Okay, here we are. We're at the contribution revolution. Casey named all of these talks, just FYI. So if you have questions, I'm Drew, developer, engineer, manager, other things here at Kuali for the Kuali Research.
I'm Jenny.
There we go.
I'm engineering manager at Kuali Research.
Hi, Jeff McGregor from Indiana University. I'm the manager of the Research Administration Systems team here.
And I'm Peter Brown, also at IU under Jeff, the tech lead on his team.
We shouldn't have let it pass by, everyone. Jeff just sort of says his name. You know, come on. We all know him by his real name, right? Quick Start. Let's go, Quick Start. Yeah. We all type it. We all type it every day. Maybe not everyone, but I type it every day. I type Quick Start every day. And we're in here with this presentation with the man, the myth, the legend, Quick Start himself. Anyway, Jennifer, contribution revolution.
We're here to talk about the contribution revolution that's been going on at Kuali. And some of the highlights we want to hit are why we do this, why it's important to us, how it came about. We have a long history of contributions at Kuali, the process and how it all works, why we love it and consider it to be a successful venture. And for those of you who are interested, how you can get involved. Drew's gonna kick us off with why we do contributions.
Yeah, so why we do contributions is from the origins of the company, right? We do contributions because we wanted to collaborate. You know, it started as a collaboration across institutions. We still do it as a company because we really value the experience that the engineers at universities have. You know, you're working directly, you have even closer access to the researchers than we do. And we love to have your contributions. You know, part of the history, why don't you go ahead, Jenny, the history of our contributions, right? A lot of you might know this, maybe you don't, but I mean, Kuali started as an open source product. We started as, you know, a bunch of contributions coming together. Some of you have been there since almost like for a long time. Like let's have some reactions. Who was here from foundation days? Give us a joy emoji reaction if you've been here since the foundation days. I want to see some reactions. Okay, I've got some good ones here. We got some good emojis. I can't see everyone. Okay. Doug's been here forever. That's for sure. Oh, I love you, Doug. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Doug's great, everyone. If you don't know that already, you probably all know that. Okay. But so, you know, we started off as an open source group. Contributions were everything. And, you know, sort of more recently, contributions have sort of become, you know, more limited, especially with the advent of the node modules. You know, a lot of the contributions come into the sponsored program modules, through their bug fixes. They're smaller. You know, we have some really huge contributions that are great from CSU in export control. Pretty awesome that we're able to share with everyone and sort of, you know, advance on some more. Then, you know, there's other great contributions that we've received, but a lot of times how the contributions have come about has been a little bit different. You know, it's not been a deep collaboration. That's sort of the big thing that we've done. Jeff, what's been your perspective, you know, from a partner school on collaborations?
Yeah. So like Drew mentioned, you know, I use one of those schools that's been involved with Kuali for basically forever. We used to, you know, back in the foundation days, we would contribute resources to the primary development of the application. So, you know, we were able to, like, through that process, we kind of built up a lot of experience with the code, with the, you know, sponsored programs modules in particular, you know, the old, what you sometimes hear referred to as the monolith. So when we implemented those modules on premise, we obviously had a lot of experience coding in there. We could, since it was open source, you know, we could get in there and maybe our business partners and the Office of Research Administration, you know, would ask us to do an enhancement for them, or we'd find a bug that we could fix real quick. So that was great, but it was also a little bit of a double-edged sword because, you know, the more over time as we made those changes, we became more and more divergent from what the base code looked like, and it made it harder and harder to upgrade because we had to reconcile, you know, the changes coming in from the foundation or from the company against what we had done locally. So contributions were a good way to kind of mitigate that. So if we could get our changes into the base code, then it would, you know, hopefully it would benefit the product and benefit the community, but it would also benefit us when we were looking to you know go ahead and upgrade at some point. So so that was, you know, that was pretty good, but there were some drawbacks. I mean, essentially our model was a little bit backwards than what would be ideal. So we would typically, you know, go ahead and do those enhancements or bug fixes, get them into production locally, and then we would, when we had time, you know, we try to circle back and do the contribution, you know, when we had some room in a sprint or something. So, you know, we were able to get a lot of our customizations and enhancements into the base code, but it wasn't super efficient because, you know, we would often have to go back, you know, based on feedback from the company or feedback from the community, we would have to go back and rework some of those. So they were just a better fit, you know, generally.
Yeah.
So when we, yeah, so when we were, you know, we were looking to implement quality protocols, and, you know, there were some functional gaps that needed to be filled, and we'll talk a lot more about that later in the presentation. But, you know, we started thinking about, you know, is there a way to use the contribution model to try to fill some of those gaps? And, you know, is this an opportunity for us to really start, like, kind of do it the right way, the more prescribed way, get these contributions and you know, see how that works compared to what we had been doing. So yeah, so that's kind of our experience. And
Spoiler, it was fun. Does anyone else have anything they want to share just about their history of contributing? I know there's a lot of people here that have contributed and their experience contributing. It's okay. Okay. Well, Jenny, why don't you share the sort of the process?
Yeah, so Greg touched on bug fixes and new features, new functionality. And we kind of break up our processes into two different categories based on whether it fits into a bug fix or a new feature. And regardless of which of those categories it's in, all contributions will be functionally reviewed, code reviewed, and if it's applicable, it'll be design reviewed. And new functionality we define as new modules that are being developed that don't already exist, or a new feature added to an existing module in Kuali Research. And a bug fix we define as a fix to our current code base. And sometimes there's gray areas there where we have to kind of decide which do these really fit into, and we just do our best to put it into one of those categories. And that kind of determines a little bit for which type of process we choose for the contribution. And for both categories, we have three major things that we look for in a contribution. One is the code for the fix, and also unit and integration tests for that, and user documentation. And if it's a new feature, our standards are a little bit higher because we're looking at having to maintain that code for a long time, and usually it's going to be a pretty significant contribution. So we want to make sure everything is there that we need to like really support that, bring that new functionality into our code base. And so additional things that we might look for would be database scripts like a migration, additional test cases and test scripts. And most likely we'll have a feature flag for that functionality so we can control the rollout of that feature into production. And we might even roll it out differently at different rates for different tenants. And so that gives a lot of control on our release for that new feature. Our contribution process is pretty long, and you know, we spend a lot of time. You think of contribution as being like a code contribution, but the whole process itself involves a lot of things and a lot of really active steps outside of just contributing the code itself. And almost certainly the process will start with a Zendesk ticket. You know, a user will define a bug that they found or a problem they'd like to solve. And if they're interested in submitting a contribution for that, then we would begin engaging with them in a process of figuring out whether it's a good fit, whether that's a relationship that we want to nurture and engage with. And once we're at that phase, then we could start outlining the requirements for what that contribution would look like. And after that, then the appropriate product team would be engaged to write the tickets for that, define all the functionality and edge cases, and figure out what tests we need to write, and kind of become pretty functional at that point. Like, what do we need to do to get this feature across the finish line? And once everything's defined and tickets are created, then at that point, the contributor would add pull requests. And when Kuali reviews pull requests, we kind of review them with like the same standards we would if we were reviewing our own code from our own developers. So you know, it's yeah, basically the same standards that we would use. And we're looking for like kind of similar code conventions and stuff that we would use. And that's kind of an active process where there might be some feedback in that step as well as the others for things that we might like to see be done a little bit differently. And finally, we would have some kind of user group testing, potentially just internal testing to verify the functionality is there and behaves as expected before we roll out that feature to production. We've been collaborating with IU for a really long time, and we had a particularly intense year this past year with 3 new features and multiple bug fixes before the protocols release. And so that was a really extensive process where we were really highly engaged with them for several months. If maybe there's something that you all would like to say a little bit more about that process and what brought you to the point of wanting to engage us with in that process.
Yeah, so just to provide some background. So we kicked off our implementation of Kuali protocols in February of 2020. And at the time of kickoff, there were actually several features that we really needed to go live that hadn't been developed yet. They were, most of them were on the roadmap at some point, but some of them were like very, very close to our go live, or maybe even a little past our go live. For various reasons. In some cases, they were things that we cared about a little bit more than than the general community. In some cases, they were just very large enhancements that were going to take a lot of time to get done. So in the past, we were a little uncomfortable just sort of trying to push that timeline. In the past, with like our conflict of interest and commitment implementation, we had contracted with Kuali to push some of our needed features forward a little bit on the timeline. So that's sometimes an option that's available, but in this case, I think from both sides there was a little uncertainty about the capacity and uncertainty about the ability on our side for the to come up with that money. It was still a little like COVID was kind of on the horizon and potentially affecting the fiscal situation. So we thought let's take a look at a kind of a development partnership. Maybe we can partner up and use our resources to fill some of those gaps. And then and the other factor here is we did really have a pretty strict go live date that we really didn't want to slip, which was January 2021. If we missed that date, we were going to have to push back probably 3 or 4 months at least, just because of various things going on campus and in the offices. So that was really that was really the impetus for us to ask about the development partnership, and fortunately Kuali was very receptive.
We had like multiple features that we were developing, and we thought it would be fun to do kind of a case study of one of them where we could talk specifically about what we call multiple pending amendments. Because this feature was really interesting because it was pretty complex, and it was a major change to our protocol workflow. For those of you who don't know very much about protocols, we basically have a versioning system for protocols. Anytime a major change happens, then a new protocol version gets created. And when you have an amendment, which is basically a request to change something, kind of a fork on that flow where somebody can amend a few things and then request approval for it, and it gets merged back in after that approval. And prior to the contribution that IU made, we had a single pending amendment that was allowed at one point in time. And we decided to open that up to have a flow that allowed multiple pending amendments. And this all came from IU's need for a little more flexibility with how that works. And so do you all want to say a little bit more about your needs there and why you wanted to change that feature?
Sure. Yeah. So prior to, so we've had the KCIRB module, the old monolith module running on premise for several years here, and that module does support multiple pending amendments. So it was just something that our office had gotten used to being able to do, is allow the study teams to submit multiple amendments and renewals and have those both going through in parallel and processing them in parallel in the office. So only being able to do a single amendment or renewal at a time was going to be kind of a functional regression for us that we were hoping to avoid.
So for those of you who haven't seen amendments yet, or multiple pending amendments for that matter, I've just got a couple of screenshots so we can kind of bring you in the loop for this feature that we worked on and some of the problems and challenges that we faced while we were planning this and how we came about to resolving them. So basically, one of the major challenges that we faced in the planning phase of this was that we were thinking about, with multiple pending amendments, if anybody can amend any portion of the protocol, you run into a situation where you could potentially have merge conflicts when you try to bring those, approve those changes and bring them back onto the base protocol. And so we wanted to solve that problem with the easiest solution possible that covered all of our use needs. And so what we ended up with was this system for letting the users choose which sections they want to amend. And as a result of this choice, there were a lot of design elements that had to be developed. And we have a view here where the user would be choosing which sections they want to amend. And you can see here that there's this grayed out option where we're indicating a section is currently an amendment. And so we've locked that section from other users being able to amend it. And to allow a little extra flexibility, we have some ability to add and remove sections throughout the entire process, as long as they're not currently tied up in another amendment process. And in order to make everything obvious to the user what's going on, there were a lot of small design changes that added up to quite a bit of work here, with indicating which sections are an amendment in this particular version, which ones are locked. And in this screen, you can see that even this basic versioning dropdown that we have underwent a lot of changes, because before we would have an amendment with its status in progress approved visible here, but with multiple pending amendments, there was no way to visually distinguish them from each other. They looked the same in this dropdown. And so we added some additional information to let the users quickly see which sections were being amended. And another change was that we went from a system of generally having one, maybe two active versions on any protocol. If you have an amendment, you might have the amendment and then your base protocol as your active versions. But with multiple pending amendments, you now have potentially multiple active versions. And so we had a design decision made to make that more visible to the user so that they could see this information more clearly. And so this started off as kind of a somewhat simple concept of okay, we wanted to go from single to multiple, and through this planning process, we quickly ended up with many different parts of the protocol process and views that were updated and changed, and we had many tickets related to this particular feature. And just to give you an idea, just just how active of a process this was on all sides. Like we had a dedicated sprint board for the IU team where we were managing all of their tickets. And here you can see the multiple colors here indicate different epics or different features. And you can also see some bug tickets. And this is just one screenshot at one point in the process. But so we had a sprint board to manage all of this stuff because there were so many things going on at once, and we wanted to keep track of it. So the whole process can actually, for significant enhancements like this, it's very thorough and well planned, and a very active, engaged collaboration the whole way through. And in the end, IU contributed 3 major features, several bugs, and completed over tickets before their protocol go live date. And that's kind of like the functional perspective there, what was going on and how we accomplished it all. IU had a very unique perspective from their side for how that all went, and perhaps they can share something with us on that.
Yeah, and yeah, so first, shout out to Nick Valier, who did a lot of the dev work on that multiple pending amendments feature, which was very complicated. So, starting out, when we were thinking about this last year, the main concern we had was being able to skill up and be productive on the new stack. We were obviously very comfortable in the old sponsored programs, kind of enterprise Java stack, but the new compliance modules are full stack JavaScript, MongoDB for persistence. So it was kind of a new stack for most of us on the IU side. So we did do some, we used Pluralsight to kind of skill up before we started doing the dev work on Kuali itself, and I think that was helpful. Kuali team did a pretty good job of on-ramping us, but I'll throw it over to Peter now to get into some more details from his perspective, from the dev perspective.
Yeah, I would say from the dev perspective, I think kind of the 2 biggest things that contributed to our success was just kind of the low on ramp of, I think the first couple tickets that we were starting with Kuali back in late spring, summer, were literally just, change this text. And for somebody who's never seen a giant node application that is thousands of files and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, even just tracking down that can take more time than it should. But just starting slow like that, and then all of a sudden now we got to create a new modal window, and then we got to change a permission here and there, and just kind of touching a broad range of the application was very enlightening and allowed us to kind of ease into it. And then as we started getting towards some of the more major features accumulating with multiple amendments, I think we all felt comfortable. I think we built some trust and rapport with the Kuali team, and it was just, I thought it was very interesting, because what developer doesn't want to learn new skills? What developer doesn't want to see how something is working? And so rather than kind of just turn over this black box and to Kuali and just say, okay, we trust you with it, I for one appreciate the opportunity to dig in and actually see what's going on and learn something new at the same time.
One thing that from the Kuali perspective that I felt was that, for us, it was a lot of the same steps for, grooming a new feature and, tracking it across our sprint boards and, code reviews. So really during this whole process, for us, it felt like, IU was just kind of an extension of our team during this process. So they're kind of like temporary adopted Kuali family for us while we've been working through that, and even ongoing now. And so that's been really nice. It's been a fun experience for us. And of course, I think anytime you try something new, you're going to learn a few lessons, and we definitely did learn some stuff along the way.
Yeah, and I can take this part as well. I think the first thing that we've kind of touched on a couple of times is that this is a process, and This isn't something, especially for a feature anywhere near the scale that we were working on at the end, this isn't something you're going to throw together in a week, send it off to Kuali, and then expect that it's going to be testable a week after that. This is months, and in a good way. And that ensures that there's quality here, that ensures that it's meeting everyone's standards, that it's accessible, and etc. And so I think plan early, be willing to learn and communicate openly and honestly, I think helps a lot. We had bi-weekly touch bases sometimes just to make sure everyone's on the same page. We learned a lot. We were willing to ask stupid questions where, how do you make the CSS file available behind a feature flag? And Kuali does that, has hundreds of examples of it, but it's not immediately obvious to somebody who's not totally familiar with some of these things. And so I think just having open honesty, be willing to take the time to do it right, I think goes a very long way. Yeah, I think we were pretty happy with the results in the end, though.
Yeah, I think that like, the interesting thing to me is that like part of why it's successful is because there was some sacrifice on both ends a little bit, where there's investment from both people, like both teams, Kuali is saying, okay, yeah, these features, these features make sense for our whole community, Hamza and the product management, and Aaron, they determine what makes sense for the whole community. How can we, not just meet IU's needs, but the whole community's needs. And then IU's willing to put in the work to, to get our PR reviews back. And you spent time getting your local environment set up, which unfortunately at this point is sort of annoying with setting up like an NPM, a local NPM hosting registry. So there's a little bit of investment that takes place there. But like, I think of, like you said, like there's so many apps that I use where I'm just like, I wish I could just go and like fix this one bug. Like it's so annoying. And it's sort of this great thing that we have where we have this ability to open it up, to advance your skills. I remember working at the university. It was so frustrating sometimes because you just couldn't help someone with certain things. And it's sort of this nice thing where it's like, well, I can actually help like a lot of people. We started, like you said, we started early, like last year, a year ago at this time, I was talking with Victor and Jen about, hey, you must to go live in a year. That seems like forever away at the time. And here's some things. What do you think? And so we were talking through it, and and then we sort of warmed up to it. Like you said, we sort of, well, we could all sort of with our checkpoints. So like, how's everything going? Everything good? Everything? We still collaborating well? Is this still a healthy collaboration and not like a weird, oh, you're submitting PRs that just you're never listening to our feedback in them, and so you're never getting emerged, so you're annoyed. There's ways that these things can go poorly, and so we just sort of continually look to check in on those, and so it worked out really well. But it took work, it took investment from both groups, and an openness to sort of work through it.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways it can go poorly, so it does feel very lucky that we had such a great outcome, and a lot of that did come down to communication. Anytime we can do something like this, it doesn't just benefit the school that wants to contribute, but potentially all the other schools that can use the features that have been contributed. So, one of the reasons why we want to keep trying to do this as much as possible, because there's so many wins all around for both Kuali and for all of the schools that are using our product.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, for us, we did make our implementation date, so that was obviously the top line kind of win for us, but it was really good, like Peter mentioned, it was really good for our team to get some experience with with some different technologies and learn some new things, and we really valued Kuali's willingness to work with us. I mean, this we both invested a lot on this, and I think it ended up being a win-win. We invested dev time, but then Kuali was doing a lot of design work and helping us get on board and providing feedback and reviewing pull requests and meeting with us. So it really, yeah, I think it worked out well. And, you know, we starting early was key, because we were able to take that time to do, you know, good design work. You just comparing it to the model we had been on in sponsored programs, you know, there was a lot less kind of having to go back and rework things because we were just tightly coupled kind of from the beginning. And it didn't even feel, you know, sometimes these implementations, you know, you're in that last month and you're scrambling and you feel like it's a death march, and it really didn't even feel like that. It was really pretty smooth. So we were very happy.
Hopefully, you know, all of you are sitting here wondering how you can contribute after hearing all of these great success stories from this collaboration between Kuali and IU.
Yeah, I mean, the core of it is, you know, the start of this was talking with customer success, talking with support, reviewing the documentation. The best collaborations, like that, you know, this best collaboration was because it was well before it was absolutely needed, and it was before it was developed, and we were able to work through it through our normal process and have the ability to ramp up the team, right? And so, you know, the key is it's still, even though it like sort of it started by follow, you know, the process was a little bit more iterative, right? You know, we have that long document where you start with customer success and then you do this and then you do this. And we started with customer success and had a sort of agreement, and then we sort of iterated throughout those, right? So there's a lot, you know, that's sort of how it can look as we, you know, continue to sort of, especially with the cloud-based modules, cloud-based customers, you know, it's great for me. It's so exciting because we were able to see, you know, we hadn't accepted contributions to the cloud software before, specifically to the new models, the Node and the React. And so this is really exciting because no one's really running any of the protocols locally for their customers right now, for their institutions on-prem. And so it's really exciting. There's no one that's off of a crazy branch on protocols right now. No one's still on 5.2.1 of protocols. All you 5.2.1ers out there. But like this link here, this is the contribution model. This is the way to go about it. So it was great. I'm super excited. What questions do you all have for us? What sort of things do people have they want to chat about? We're open. Thank you, everyone. This was great. You all were great. Peter. Oh, Chris, so you got a hand raised over here, I think, maybe.
Hi. Just a question for the university side of things. How much actual ramp up time to get to that point of being able to fix that first small bug? Like, are we talking 40 hours of effort, 80 hours of effort, more or less?
I would say just getting a local instance of protocols, as Drew kind of alluded to, with NPM repositories and all that kind of stuff, I would say that's most of it. And yeah, I would say a week, depending on your university's. Like our university already had an NPM repository for a lot of these packages that we could shove things into. Whether you're doing that all locally, and I mean, obviously there's any number of wildcards, but yeah, a week or two, and you can have a local instance up or a private university instance up. If you're literally just trying to search out a string replacement, yeah, you can probably do that in an hour once you have that up and running and you can test it and you get the GitHub pull in, then yeah, you could do it in a week. But if you, at least from my perspective, I had never coded in any of this stuff before. And so I wanted to understand a little bit of more of the why beforehand. So then, yeah, another week or two of, you know, whatever kind of training you want to do, whether it's Pluralsight like we use, whether it's kind of like guided lessons, or whether you're just reading Stack Overflow. I mean, whatever you want to do. But yeah, I would say a week or two of instance setup plus another week of just trying to wrap your head around what you're looking at.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. What other questions do we have out there?
I know I know at one point there's discussion about having, I think it was Docker containers or
Yeah.
something? Maybe I should already know the answer to this, but is that still
Yeah.
on the horizon? Is
So
that a
we
way to?
we do have Docker containers for most things, and actually in the repositories. So the other thing that we've discussed is opening up the npm packages, and opening up our npm registry to be able to be shared with you all. Because right now we host our own npm registry for our private things like Kuali, and some of the other things, and so that leads to you having to get those built before you can build it. You can run the Docker, but the challenge with that one is that by just running the Docker container, you're not going to have. Sometimes you have to mess with some of those repositories, and so you're going to want to have the ability to like sort of link those for one, and then the other one is that we actually have, once you actually have the npm registry up and going, we have a Docker Compose that's pretty easy to follow in both COI and in protocols, that you can just say Docker Compose up, and it will spin it up, the app running, with mocked authentication, so you don't have to get core main up and running as well. So like that's in both of those repos, but the key for both of those is that you do have to have the npm built. But we do have Docker Hub, Docker images that are more really for like deployment. It's to make it easier for doing deployment. And I think that if you don't have access to those, I think most people should, most institutions should have access to that Docker Hub account. But we do release those every build. But for local development, it's better if you can get the registry stuff going. But once you get those things running, actually running the applications is really quick. And the main challenge with getting those others built is that they run on different versions of Node, because maybe they're an older library where we haven't upgraded Node in it yet. And so, if you're not using something like a Node version manager, which I think we reference that kind of stuff in the docs, but if you're using not using a Node version manager, you might be like, wait, whoa, why did this not build correct? So that's sort of the key there, but that's why local development, it's valuable to get that running. And the same thing applies. With the dashboard, we're working on for the dashboard, an ability to run that entirely without having to run necessarily the whole monolith next to it. And so there's a few other things that we're working on in those other Node applications. At this point, the monolith's the hardest thing to run. So if you can get the monolith running, you should be able to get this running. I believe in all of you. Because I still haven't gotten the monolith running yet. So that's my own weakness. Yeah. No, thanks for your question, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the
go
one thing I was thinking
Definitely.
of was monolith related. I'm assuming that there isn't a Docker container for the.
Well, we're sort of working on, we're actually working on like a Kubernetes Helm chart for that right now. I think there might actually be some Docker Composes written for the monolith as well. Doug is nodding yes, because Doug is the man. Doug actually wrote some, I think. But
yeah, I did write some, although it's with our internal Docker image. But I do think if there is interest in a Docker image as a monolith, it wouldn't be a significant amount of work to rework the current one to be like on-prem compatible.
Yeah, and we could certainly share components of that kind of thing for people interested in getting access to those. Because I'll tell you this, that's one of the things we discovered with our own internal development. That's the way we ramped up Peter and Nick, really, was treating them like onboarding developers on our team. Because I think it's important to be able to get it going. The challenge is we have to deal with some other limitations because we're in, you're not technically on the team. And so there's some slight limitations. We can't give you everything we have, but we try to give almost everything. We have documentation on how things work and where files can be found and things like that we've put together, that once we entered into, and once NDAs have been signed and things like that, we're able to sort of be a bit more open with. A sort of a bar has been cleared, hurdles and stuff. But even still, we have some things that we'd love to share, because like I said, these contributions are awesome. And like I tell you, there's an app I open every day and there's a bug in it. I'm so annoyed. I want to email them and be like, can I please try to fix this for you? Because every day I experience it. And I think maybe every developer feels that. Like there's only one thing I want to do, like to work at Apple. I want to fix parental controls slightly. I just want to work there so I can improve parental controls. That's all. Just do that. So anyway, like there's these things and working on these products, it's so much fun too. Like the new stuff, the working in React, the feedback loop is so fast. I don't know, you all didn't talk about that really, Peter, but like, I'm sure you probably noticed how much faster it is to see how much faster you see feedback from working in like KRAD or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That is definitely true. Yeah, I mean, as you were alluding to, it's a reload of a page instead of shut down your Tomcat server, make the change, build everything, and start up Tomcat, and then all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, you can finally see your string change.
I mean, the downside of that is you have less, excuses for your compile time. Like you have all this extra time where you have to be developing software instead of just like, Redditing or something, but yeah. Awesome. What other questions do we have? Thanks again, Zach. That's great.
I had a question. I'm from UCI. I worked on setting up a research light for, I think, our COI interconnection, stuff like that. And we had some sort of contribution for, we still use Oracle for some things and needed to use that part of Research Lite and kind of submitted something there. And I kind of handed that off to someone with Zendesk already sent up. So I made the code change and I'm like, you handle the whole quality process because I'm not really sure. And so I'm just wondering, what possibilities for improvements are there, do you think, in the future to this process? So I also come from open source, and open source, you have, okay, it's everywhere, open a PR to that branch. They have some checklists for it to match conventions. It seems like an easier barrier to entry, but also the licensing is different, right? Open source is usually at your own risk. And so, which is not the same for quality products, obviously. So having your current process helps to ensure that this code is properly planned for and long-term strategies and things like that. But it does seem like a bit much. So I don't know if if Quali's been thinking about improvements to the process.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we think a lot about it, right? And that's why these collaborative sort of relationships are great, for one, because it allows us to, get, we've got expectations set a little bit better. And we know where they're coming from. One of the other main reasons we had the Jira stuff is for our own internal SOC controls. We have to have a Jira for everything that goes out into the production. And so like everything that's merged has to be associated with a Jira into our code bases that are deployed. Now, Research Lite's its own funky animal, a beautiful, funky beast that is Research Lite. And so, but one of the things we have been examining is how do we adapt some more of those concepts from, especially for things like bug fixes, little improvements. How do we adapt, to some changes that we can bring in and have clear contributions, expectations, SLAs, just so we make sure we have a team member assigned to going through and looking through those things. One of the challenges with Research Lite specifically is that because we don't actually run Oracle here and such, like we run several giant on-prem, if you will, tenants, but there's slightly different things behind them. So, we've had instances where there's been a bug in a Research Lite, change, and then, it's affected other, so that's the challenge with the Research Lite, because it's a bit more Wild Westy than everything else. It's a lot easier if you contribute to protocol COI dashboard. We're all doing that stuff every single day. And so it's sort of like, oh, well, I pull this down, I tested, but that's one of the areas that's actually a weaker. We have checklists for the other applications that we follow, and then we encourage everyone else to follow as well. We probably won't approve yours without meeting the checklist. But that's one. Research Lite is like one of those ones that's like a hole in the system. But it's a very solid. It's something that we've been talking about for a little bit, about how we improve just the expectations, because we don't want PRs to sit out there forever and you're just like, what the heck? And the key really for the customer success stuff is, if there's small changes to Research Lite, money. If there's bug fixes, great. I mean, we need to have a Jira for it, but excellent. When we're talking like hey, I really wish the software did this. That's when we've got to get designers and we've got to sort of get, hey, okay, that's where we got to bring everyone else. But most other stuff, like Jenny said, we can, once we have a Jira for it, we can just, make it all happen with you. But I encourage you to join what was formerly the on-prem users group, and it's now called Office Hours. I think that's what I'm calling it now. It's super cool. I like your guitar, something like that. Anyway, once a month, encourage you to come and join us there and chat about the stuff, because that's one of the places we talk about all these sorts of things. And if we've missed something and you're like, hey, I have this thing, it's a great place to come and chat with the developers and get stuff merged. So that's in the Zendesk somewhere.
Yeah.
I should know exactly where it is. Victor's like, Drew, you are full, but that's okay. That's what he normally says. I love Victor. Well, yeah, no, it's good feedback, Chris.
Yeah, and I think that's an important clarification, actually, because like most if not all of our contributions had some kind of UX component to them, which is why it was important to kind of work through the quality, like the design process. So I mean, I don't want to speak for Drew and Jenny, but my guess is like a kind of an infrastructure change like that would probably be a little more streamlined.
No, thanks, Chris. Thanks so much. It's so great. So good to have people contribute. I mean, we're really working. We really do want to make sure that the process is smoother for people. And so where, hey, is someone even going to ever look at this sort of thing? I think we want to make sure that feeling doesn't happen. So yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this chat. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.